Welcome to this edition of Pet Chat, recording with Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension Service. Join us today as special guest Bryan Calk walks through raven and crow identification as they get ready for a spooky Halloween season. Enjoy! Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cup Chat with Birding with Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension Service. Super excited to be on. I feel like it's like no special, I mean, you are a special guest to us, Bryan, but you're not really a special guest because you are a team member. We're so excited to have you on. And today we're talking about identifying blackbirds. And so I don't know if that's actually the complete title, but I've made it up this morning and I've thought about it in my head, is that there are a lot of blackbirds. And especially when we look at like, and then I thought about, well, you know, you even have the back, when something's backlit, it could look like a blackbird. So, and then Liz thinks it's all Halloweeny and gruely when we talk about like crows and ravens and crows versus ravens. So Bryan, why don't you kick us off and talk about maybe the challenges with identifying blackbirds? Whatever blackbirds you want to identify this morning.
Okay, sounds good. I pulled up some pictures of some black birds. So we can kind of go through those. But I didn't make any sort of presentation or anything this morning. But yeah, challenges with this sort of category of birds. I think the main thing is, the most obvious thing is that there's no real markings to rely on anymore. We've sort of taken away that crutch of ID that a lot of people look to first when they're looking at a bird, is what are the markings. And I always say that that's kind of the last thing I look at, or it's the last thing I suggest that people look at when you're identifying a bird, because it's something that can be really misleading if the lighting is wrong, or if it's in a weird plumage, or it's molting or whatever.
Well, even like amongst, even if they have what you call like normal plumage, there's like color variation between individuals, and even depending where you are in the United States, it varies ever so slightly. So I had never thought about it, but yeah, coloration is probably one of the last things you should go off of, especially with birds.
Right. And you know, I think once you've been birding for a while and you've had a lot of field experience looking at birds, you kind of have that, you realize that you're doing those other steps of ID without even thinking about it. Like you're assessing the habitat, you're assessing the size, you're assessing the behavior, and it's narrowing it down to, oh, this is probably a warbler. And then you start looking at markings. You do all that in your head, but really when you take away all the color, like all these black birds, you're like forced to, take all that in.
Well,
anyway.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Do you want to go through some examples?
We do. But the other one I was thinking about, and I was scrolling through my Merlin app this morning, looking at just, refreshing my blackbirds.
Mm-hmm.
Another blackbird, but has a little bit of color that almost can fit into the creepy Halloween category too, is the red-winged blackbird.
Absolutely. Yep.
Creepy and eerie, and
yep. And they congregate in like huge numbers. Just kind of gives that feeling of the birds
attacking us.
See, I know what the birds is. I've never actually seen the movie though. I feel like I need to watch it.
Oh, you should totally watch it.
You've never seen, you don't know what we're talking about?
No.
It's Alfred Hitchcock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to be about this, like, what is it? Like some sort of a disease that takes over these birds, and these birds start like mobbing people and flying into windows, and yeah.
Nope. And I'm not a big movie buff. I mean, I hate to say that. I just am not. So, okay. Well, let's step in. Let's look at some of the blackbirds.
Okay. So I let's see if I can. You let me share my screen.
Oh, you need to give him permission.
Sorry.
You're good.
You should have now all the permission you want.
Got it.
Good morning, Rainy.
Good morning.
The
The curse of the slow internet in Real Caddy has struck again.
At least you have internet. Apparently, Brian is.
And then when you add rain on top of anything in like a rural county, it just challenges it even more. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can confirm.
okay. Can you see my whole screen?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So I think I'm going to start with the two that I think are the most sort of iconic in terms of like Halloween themed. And those would be the common raven and American crow. And those are also the two that are going to be the most widespread, I guess, for most people. So starting with the raven. Let's see. Okay. So the raven happens to be a bird whose photo, this is one of my favorite photos I've ever taken. But the raven is, they're bulky, they have kind of this commanding presence about them. If you've ever been to some of like the national parks in the West, you'll see them like hopping around parking lots and looking for scraps and things. That's what this one was doing. These are corvids. So we were talking about black birds earlier. So black space bird versus the blackbirds, one word. That's a group of birds taxonomically that's separate from the corvids. So grackles would be in that same group, cowbirds. And then corvids is the jays, ravens, crows, that sort of thing. Known for being highly intelligent. Ravens have this kind of scraggly, scruffy ruff of feathers across the upper breast. And this big honking heavy bill with long bristles going down it. That's about all we can tell from this picture. But just from this, ruffled neck alone, this tells me it's a common raven.
Well, I think that's a great picture to see that in, because some pictures, or when they're just out far away, in the pasture, that's where I see the most, is you don't always see, they can be a little sleeker looking sometimes there.
Yeah, kind of like this one, who's just kind of out on a Sotol bloom or something in Big Bend. Yeah, and you're exactly right. These little detail marks are really difficult to see a lot of the time. And especially because they're just all blackbirds. So using that little ruff of feathers across the neck, if it's in a weird light or it's far away, like you were saying, you may not be able to see that. And that is one of those kind of field marks for telling the crow versus the raven. So it's, at Extension, we are always talking about building the case for a bird ID. And that's kind of a perfect example of that. You can't just use one thing.
And another weird thing, and I'll jump in, is it's hard to see black things. So we talk about a black cow. We use this in the stock show livestock world, everyone too, is like a black cow. It's really hard to see those defining traits because it's all black and it all blends. And it's really hard to picture black cattle. And so really thinking about translating that into bird world in the same respect is black. When you have an all black object, sometimes it's hard to see some of those details because everything is black.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It all gets kind of lost and washed out in even the slightly less optimal lighting. It's just gone. And here's another example of a couple of ravens where that little ruff of feathers on the neck is really difficult to see. But these two are bonding, they're preening each other, and just kind of an example of the intelligence of these birds. This was in the middle of winter and they're still doing pair bonding. Because of their intelligence, and common ravens are found all around the world, there are lots of sort of ancient myths and stories told about ravens. like in Europe, they were associated with war and kind of dark themes, whereas in North America and native cultures, they're seen as like, sort of like the trickster, and they play a part in the origin of creation. So really super iconic birds. Anything else on ravens? I can think. Oh, well, let's see ID points wise.
Can you break down the two ravens?
Yeah, we can go through our ravens first. One more thing I wanted to point out. This is a really terrible photo, but a common raven. But it illustrates the sort of wedge-shaped tail that ravens have that crows do not. So I just wanted to point that one out. And yeah, like I said, I don't really have a presentation or outline or anything, so I'm going to be kind of scatterbrained. So
all right. Remember, there's no rules on Cup Chat.
Yep,
I'll fill in for you while you're flipping pictures.
Okay.
So,
good.
yeah. Anyway, but there are two kinds of ravens, correct?
That's right. And so this is our other kind of raven. Well, to be totally to give the whole picture, there are lots of ravens, but in the U.S.,
in the United States,
yeah, in the U.S. we have two ravens, and this is the Chihuahuan raven, which everyone who comes on my Texas and Arizona and New Mexico tours, everyone wants to see their Chihuahuan raven because they have a much more restricted range. They're just in sort of the grasslands of the Southwest. And one of the features that you'll see as far as identifying them versus common raven, one of the things you'll see in the book and everything is if the wind blows and you can see underneath those feathers, they have really white bases to their neck feathers, which is what
I think I ever knew that.
Yeah, that's what's being illustrated here. But I will say, in my own experience, it's not the best thing to sort of rely on. Well, first of all, you have to have the wind blowing and, really specific conditions. But also common ravens have, when their feathers blow up like that, it's not stark white like this is, but it's a pale gray. So it's another one of those things. Like if you don't have them side by side or under like optimal light, judging how white that really is really difficult. Let's see, range is a good thing, but there's a lot of overlap between the two ravens. Voice is probably the main thing that I use in the field. So common ravens have a large repertoire of sounds, which can be deep honking croaks, or it can be little piping sounds and all sorts of things in between. Chihuahuan ravens, in my experience, don't have quite as broad of a repertoire of sounds, and they tend to have this sort of nasally croak that's kind of, in my brain, I say it's kind of somewhere between a typical common raven and a typical American crow, leaning more kind of crow sounding. It's a lot more nasal.
I love that you called it nasally, because I feel like sometimes I could be a nasally talker or nasally on the phone. And I think that's funny that you equate that to their bird call, because I don't know that I've ever heard like if you put because some people are more nasally than others, but I don't know, like if you put let's say for cardinals up, one is going to have a nasally voice and the others are not.
Right. Yeah. It's funny how we take these like terms that we use in everyday and just apply them to birds like they're people. But it just makes sense. And it's for whatever reason, that's just kind of how it works in my brain. And yeah, I feel like I have heard some nasally cardinals, and I don't know what it is, but it's just like some sort of quality about that sound. But yeah, I would say they're a lot more nasal. And what else? So that wedge shape on the tail that I was just mentioning on the common ravens, it's not as deep of a wedge in the Chihuahuan ravens. I don't know that I have a good flight shot really showing it, but anyway, that wedge on the end of the tail is not quite as deep. Another thing that they'll show in the books that I think is only personally, in my experience, semi-reliable, and that's the length of the nasal bristles. So I don't know how well you can see those on your screen.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm gonna need some good binoculars to see those in real life, especially if it's moving.
Exactly. That's one part of it. But sometimes you can just snap a picture and like this and zoom in and see where they really were. But the thing is too that feathers wear over time. So the bristles are longer on the Chihuahuan raven, so they kind of come out to where it starts to curve down, where the upper ridge of the bill kind of bends downwards, whereas common raven, they end further back, kind of halfway out to where that starts to bend down. So if a Chihuahuan's bristles are worn, it can look like a common raven. So it's kind of one of those things, if you see the really long bristles, probably a Chihuahuan raven, but if they're short, I'm not really going to use that.
So I was
So
thinking
Bryan-
about this.
Oh, go ahead.
Really, as we make the case for what type of raven, the first question we probably need to ask ourselves is, where are we? Right?
Yes, that's the first question. Yes.
That's the first question, because Chihuahuan ravens have such a much more limited range to even get into some of these further ID points.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you're in, Washington, you're not worried about this. Unfortunately, most of their range in Texas and New Mexico and Arizona, where there are Chihuahuan ravens, there are also common ravens. An exception to that is like deep South Texas, the Valley. You only have Chihuahuan ravens. Super nice, super easy. But another thing that is kind of tied to like overall range, is sort of habitat preference. So in the West, if we're up in the mountains birding, higher elevation pine trees, sort of that feel, we're not expecting Chihuahuan raven at all. That would be just as rare, really, if one showed up in Washington, almost. They really are like strictly in the grasslands, desert, low habitats, whereas common ravens can be kind of everywhere. So if you have a raven in the low elevations, doesn't really help you, but if you're up high, you're with just commons. And then behaviorally, in the Chihuahuan raven's range, common ravens don't tend to flock up in large numbers at all, really, any time of year. Whereas Chihuahuan ravens, if you see a group of ravens like more than 4, it's very high likelihood you're looking at Chihuahuan ravens. So it's they're definitely a thing where you're making a case. Do you see more than 3? Are they making a nasally croak? How deep is the V in their tail? Can you see the rectal bristle or the bristles on the bill? All that sort of stuff. And then the flight style is sort of the last thing that I use to identify the two. And Chihuahuan ravens to me fly when they're flapping a lot like a crow, kind of rowing. Whereas common ravens, when they're flying, they look a lot more like a big raptor to me, which is a very subtle thing. Takes a lot of looking at them to get used to, but yeah.
Well, I do love how we have just made the case for bird ID. It brings my heart warm. Makes my heart warm. Very much.
I feel like
so.
that should have been the name of our cup chat this morning, is making the case. So that's okay.
Well, we're identifying blackbirds.
We can do another one.
Oh, thought that was fun. So are we moving to crows?
Let's move to crows.
Okay. So I do think that I think it's interesting, and I don't know, it's just one of my birdie moments. I do still think it's very weird that we call a group of crows a murder of crows.
Murder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just would like to know who came up with that and what they were thinking.
I don't know who came up with it or what they were thinking, but it makes sense to me in sort of the same way that the Europeans have those myths about common ravens being associated with war and stuff. Like back in the day when people died during war or whatever, there would just be a pile of bodies, and then ravens are scavengers, so are crows. And so they come in for that opportunity for a meal. So they're kind of associated with death in that way. But
Yes. Like if you've ever seen like a carcass of any animal, they're just like covered in, if the vultures are not there, it's crows or ravens. But wait, a group of ravens is called, is it a, no, it's not. Baboons are a congress. What's a group of ravens called?
an unkindness.
Oh yeah, that's what it is, an unkindness of ravens.
Just I just think somebody just decided to just pull those out of the air. I'm just saying. I don't
Some
think
of
they
them do
actually
make
thought out of them.
Some of them do make sense, but most of them, yes, you're like, where did you
Yeah.
get
was
this?
born.
Yeah.
All right. Cute little crow there. Another black
Okay.
bird.
Yep, another black bird.
Ooh, let me ask you this question though,
Mhm.
because I have a different thought. If you thought, do you think crows, what bird do you think crows could get mistaken for the most?
Well, it depends on where you are within their range, but common raven or grackles.
Because I was thinking that one very grackly looking. You know, I normally think crows, ravens, that's where our issue is. But if I didn't know where you were and I was looking quickly, didn't take my time, you kind of look like a grackle in a park there, buddy, which
Very
is kind of an
similar.
insult. I'm
I
sorry I
mean,
called you a grackle, but God, I mean, you're kind of looking grackle-esque.
it's and I think it's the daintier bill. So that raven has that honking heavy bill. It's proportionally so much bigger. And then these are a lot more sleek in that body shape, where the raven is really heavy, got kind of that raptor build. I mean, a raven is 2 feet long. That's a big bird. And a crow is, I think, 14, 15 inches, something like that, depending on the species of crow.
Right.
So they're just daintier overall. So they have that smaller feel like a grackle does. So I can see that for sure. And oftentimes people will say, "Oh my gosh, there's so many crows at HEB." It's it's the other way, So yeah, all those things I was just saying for crows: daintier, smaller, sleeker. They don't really have that ruff of feathers across the breast like the ravens do.
They've had a neck tuck or a facelift.
Right. Yes, yeah, they've taken it
I
up.
need one so I don't have that neck thing, ready.
Well, I'll go get it together.
Please, let's do it. While we're in the valley, let's do it.
There we
Speaking
go.
of which, we are going to RGV Birding Festival. So everybody make sure you stop by and say hello. So, okay, keep going, Bryan.
Absolutely. Let's see, one other thing. I guess I don't have a flight one. One thing, I had a picture of a baby common raven. I just kind of flipped through before. Here's a baby crow. One just kind of interesting, fun thing about their babies is they have kind of these pale blue eyeballs, which I think is really kind of cool. And once they fledge out of the nest, the parents take care of them full time for up to a few months. And after that, with the crows, they can kind of decide if I'm ready to go find a mate, make my own way, or if I'm going to stay behind and help my next round of siblings. So they have this sort of family group thing. So that's why you often see crows in groups of 5, 10, 12 all together. It's that family group with last year's siblings helping raise this year's siblings and so on. So
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, corvids are kind of cool in the fact that like crows are not the only one in Florida. It's a scrub jay. It's just a Florida scrub jay. Yeah, they do the same. They kind of do the same thing, but also they have males that come in and do it just so in case the breeding male dies that he can get a mate. It's very complicated, but it's super cool.
It is, yeah. And so that's these corvids. They're just so highly intelligent. And speaking of highly intelligent, this is another example of that. So this crow has a little muscle or something. But this was in Vancouver, Canada, which another thing, if you look in your book, you might see a crow called the Northwestern crow, which was recently lumped back in as one species with American crow. So this used to be a northwestern crow. Now it's just an American crow. But it took this mussel and it dropped it in the middle of the road and waited for a car to smash it. And then he hopped out and grabbed it and then hopped back and then ate his little mussel. We got to watch him do that a couple times. Just super smart.
No, I feel like we could have a whole cup chat on talking about corvid behavior. I know I had somebody that they were trying to catch ravens for some research to put backpacks on them, and it's like, if you don't get them the first time, you will never catch them because they're so smart, so smart.
Crazy smart. Yeah. That would be, I can't imagine having to outsmart
No,
a corvid for a research project. That would be challenging.
no.
Another crow that we have in the US and East Texas is fish crow, which is one that's been expanding like crazy out of the South. Typically associated with waterways, which is how they get the name fish crow. But physically pretty much identical to American crow, except that they have sort of longer wings and tails proportionally, and that's really only seen in flight for the most part. But really you tell them apart by voice. So and again, this is another nasal one. So the American crow kind of goes caw, caw, caw. And fish crow, the joke is, you ask the crow, are you an American crow? Or I don't remember how you're supposed to say the joke, but anyway, it goes, nuh-uh, nuh-uh. Instead of going caw, caw, it goes, nuh-uh. Is really this nasal call that they have.
Let's see if I can pull it up.
Really different.
I didn't even know that we had another crow here in Texas.
Such a terrible sounding bird. Meh. Meh.
I can't hear it, but it's a great
you can't
impression.
hear it?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. It's like a meh.
Yeah,
Terrible.
exactly. Unimpressed.
Yes.
And
It almost sounds like a little toddler going, meh.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not really that classic caw that we associate with crows. And this third crow that we have, the Tamaulipas crow, which is a rare visitor down in Brownsville, in South Texas, they kind of take that in sort of a cuter direction. Their call is ultra nasally and kind of like they kind of if you've ever seen them do it in person, let me see, this picture is of one calling, and they throw their wings out and back, and they like put their whole body into this call, and all that comes out is like ink. It's so cute. But yeah, like I said, these are super rare. They show up typically at the Brownsville dump in South Texas. It's a big, exciting thing when they do show up. But they're one where that black, it looks black sometimes, but if you get an overcast, nice diffused light, they're like blue and purple and glossy.
So do they are they a bit iridescent almost, or like on the verge of being iridescent?
Yeah, totally iridescent. Yep, like the whole body. It's really cool. Anyway, but that's it for crows and ravens and that sort of stuff.
That's super neat.
Yeah. Did we want to go into blackbirds at all, or I know we're kind of on time?
We're on that 8 o'clock mark, so we are probably
Okay.
going to give it a good call for today. But we want to thank everyone for joining us and hope that you enjoyed Bryan coming on a little bit and really sharing that difference between the crows and the ravens. And I really like going through and making the case for these bird identifications. If y'all have never heard our Making the Case presentation, we are hopefully rolling that out a little bit more frequently and more often. But really the goal is to get you engaged in thinking about all the different parts and pieces of bird identification versus just one. Bryan, I like the nasally. determination. And so guys, y'all go get on your bird app, listen to those calls and see if you can hear that nasal or whatever memory that triggers for you. Like for me, that it was more of a meh, like the kids, they don't want to do it kind of thought. And so try to go and learn those bird songs today. And I guess that's our challenge of the day. But we are out of time today, but I do want to throw out several things. Learn to Bird is almost full. I think we have one spot left. That is coming up in like
Next week.
just next week. Okay, so Kathy Pearson asked, what's the best bird app? So I'm a loser and I just use my Merlin app all the time because I don't have enough phone storage to add a bunch of other apps. Bryan, what do you have?
If for birding in North America, I don't think there's anything that really does it as well as the Sibley guide, the full Sibley app. I think it's like 15 or 20 bucks or something. I got it on sale for cheaper personally. But, I would pay the 20 bucks today if I had to. It's worth every penny. And then the Merlin app, which is free from Cornell. Those, if you have those two, you have pretty much everything you need for North American birding.
Yes. Well, so love that. Learn to Bird's almost full. Bryan, we are going to make you wake up early one more time, probably between now and November 10th, when we open registration for Birding the Birder, and they can plan their trip. Because I do think you have an exciting announcement about people who are planning their trip to Birding the Border. Don't you?
I do. Am I announcing that now?
I don't know. I feel like we should wait and keep everybody in suspense.
Yes,
Right.
I agree.
Okay, we're going to pause that one. You're going to keep everybody in suspense. We're going to talk about planning your trip to Birding the Border before registration opens in these next couple weeks for Cup Chat. Thank you, everyone who joined us this morning. It's been wonderful. Final thoughts, anybody?
Next time we're going to talk about turkeys. We're going to talk some turkey, talk about turkey subspecies in the United States, how to tell them apart. We're going to have the National Wild Turkey Federation on. You ever heard of them? But also working on planning our next virtual seminar series.
Yes.
That's coming up.
What's the date? Y'all tell them the date because I don't
November
remember.
29th. Is that correct? Am I saying that right? Yes, November 29th. So we'll hopefully get registration up here pretty soon. So be on the lookout for posts on Facebook and Instagram about where to go to register for that. So
super excited, everyone. Thank you so much. If you have signed up for Learn to Bird, we're super excited to have you. There is one spot left. Let's have a full house and have a great trip birding. Barbara Pokratz is going to be our experience guide. She is awesome. Bryan, you're excited to see her. We birded with her at Birding the Border in a bunch. Bryan gives her 2 thumbs up. So stay tuned and we will see y'all later. Bye, guys.
Happy Halloween.